これは君がやったのか。
僕は背中を押しただけです。
うなめ先生は人を殺すような人じゃない。
マジかよ、この眉毛物忘れ激しくない？
You know, when I was a teacher, if I had the ability to immobilize my students by licking their shadows, I still wouldn't have done it. Why? Because the floors there were nasty. However, as it turns out, the teacher Uname has no such qualms. This is the review and analysis of the third episode for Mysterious Disappearances, brought to you by Camille's Harem. Not just a podcast for novice writers by novice writers, but also a YouTube channel by novice writers for novice writers, because writing is an adventure, it's more fun with friends. And in this most recent episode of Mysterious Disappearances, we get the conclusion to the second mystery, which really wasn't much of a mystery, and I will say this right off the bat, I don't feel like the anime has properly adapted the manga in terms of the pacing, in terms of actually preserving the horror aspect and the mystery aspect of the story, and yet I still find myself really enjoying the show. It hits a lot of the right beats, and it helps to highlight some of the messages that honestly don't pop out immediately when you're first reading the manga. On top of that, this episode, if you watch it all the way through past the credits, gives you some anime original material that, if you've read ahead in the manga, hits hard in a very unique way. And this has me curious as to what the show intends to do by the time that it gets to the end of the season. Because now, since they've definitely deviated from certain aspects of the manga while adding in new material, which is relevant to the characters, actually incredibly relevant, stuff that is way later on in the manga, makes me wonder what they're going to do with the final arc being the Cat King. But that is speculation for later. Let's get to the breakdown of the events that we get here in this episode. So we pop back on over to Kisaragi Station, where Ren and Sumireko are going over all of the details that they have acquired, and by now, Ren seems to have a good idea of, okay, this is what we're dealing with here, based on the events, based on the evidence, and based on the symptoms. I can clearly say that it is this kind of a monster or demon which has affected my sister's friends, what has been attacking Oto's classmates. And Sumireko says, well, fine then, you have everything that you need. No need for me. Time for me to get back to work. And he's like, oh no, I am not letting go of you, my mature beauty. No, we are going to lay a trap for this individual. And it's not really well revealed how they realize that it is the teacher. We as the audience, we know that it is the teacher Uname. Well, they lay a trap in order to pull out the teacher, to get her to reveal herself, so that way then they can corner her, and Ren can basically kidnap her and trade her on in for a ticket. Though good enough, it's not, they don't need to trade her in. Turns out that it's just some sacred crazy relic that's imbued with demonic powers that he needs to take away from her, so that way she can stop licking shadows and causing people to freak out and get sick. Well, as we get from the beginning of this episode and throughout, Uname has a reason for going after bullies, for doing what she does. Because when she was a very young girl, her parents died, she was adopted by her grandmother, which is very sweet and sad. However, the new school that she went to was full of bullies, people who made fun of her for being orphaned, effectively, and also for being poor, and for being just socially awkward. As such, she was completely thrown around, bullied, belittled, and the teachers turned a blind eye to it and even blamed her and her grandmother for all of the abuse that she was receiving. That's a really low blow, and I'll have stuff to say about that as a former educator, but I will save that for later. And so Uname just dealt with this throughout her entire life at school, and she became a teacher in order to enable, in order to ennoble, in order to save other kids who were in her shoes and to help them be the best that they could be. She wanted to make sure that no one ever experienced anything like what she went through. And to that end, she used a special charm that her grandmother gave her before her grandmother passed away, a charm that was supposed to be that of protection. Instead, it was that of a curse, which gave her these monstrous powers that should she use the proper rhyme, should she then complete the ritual, which is the licking of shadows, she could then burn people from the inside. And as we see in this episode, it goes far beyond just simply making people sick. She can actually burn them alive with her powers. So Ren and Sumireko set up this trap where it seems as though Sumireko has again been imprisoned in the bathroom, made fun of being the apartment wife, and when Uname comes in and saves her, it is all in order to corner her, get her to reveal that she does indeed have these powers, because she's like, okay, I need to think bigger now. I also will now begin licking the shadows of the victims in order to put them out basically of their misery, to remove them from school so that way they can be out of this awful situation. And that allows Ren then to jump her from behind, and then we get this neat little magical battle right here where Sumireko actually uses her own shape-shifting or aging abilities in order to heal herself, at least to a certain extent, which is kind of cool to see, and to avoid being licked. And Ren himself has the ability with his eyes to instigate a certain amount of karma. Should any curse or person who is using a curse, who has been cursed and is using those cursed abilities to whatever ends, should he use his eyes on that person, they then receive the instant just rewards, the just desserts of their actions. And so, since Uname has been knocking out dozens, if not scores of girls, she herself gets completely wrecked and knocked out, though she doesn't die, because that's not what she has aimed to do. At least it was until she licks Sumireko on the cheek. Doing that nearly kills her, and thanks to Ren saving her and her own aging curse, which allowed her to heal by aging herself up properly and away from being a teenager, which is when she had been injured, that avoided the death penalty for Uname, just though by a smidge. And so by the end of the episode, Uname is in the hospital for getting wrecked. The curse is now completely a part of her. You can actually even see the horns that are up at the top of her head. There's no going back on those little beauties. The curse has been completely transferred over from the charm now to her. Just like Sumireko, she is now a living curse. And yet her students still come to check in on her. Though they don't know that she is the one who instigated their torment, they come in and they have a chat with her, and she begins to realize, I was wrong. I took this way too far. And again, I will have a discussion on that in a little bit. And without the charm to exchange for a ticket, Ren and Oto are back to square one, though granted, the school is now safe from any shadow licking. And Ren apologizes to Sumireko. As he did a little bit more research and digging into what was actually happening here, he realizes that he got it wrong. That Uname wasn't using some evil demon, but rather the piece of yet another demon. This time, though, a good one who had served this ancient family and had been broken into pieces. This is again where the anime is definitely missing a lot of the context of the manga, where they actually dive way deeper into the history of these different curiosities, of these different myths, folklore, and monsters that help them to connect the dots and make sense of this particular reveal. And then we get winks to the cats and also to yet another curiosity which is playing out in the background. And I do like that. I do like that this anime is laying out the trail of breadcrumbs for things that are meant to develop later on. And in the post-credit scene, we see Ren reading to Oto the book that Sumireko wrote as a teenager. And again, that's actually anime original material. What's more is that it has a bit of foreshadowing to Ren's true identity. Alright, so let's start breaking this down. Let's start analyzing this properly. As I said at the beginning, this is actually not that great of an adaptation of the manga, even though it's actually hitting a lot of the major beats of the manga. The problem is the pacing. The pacing is going way too fast. When it comes to a horror stories are meant to draw out the pacing, so that way the tension and the anxiety is at a peak. That way you're high strung, you're at the edge of your seat, worrying what's going to happen next. And the mystery of the monster is completely kept away from you, so that way you get the good jump scares, so that way you get the confusion, so that way you get the real good spookiness. However, as the anime is playing it, it's delivering a lot of the answers to you pretty quickly. Now, the manga itself doesn't try to keep some of the answers from you, actually really all that much. This arc in the manga also really quickly gives to you who the culprit is behind all of these attacks, that it's the teacher. The real mystery is why, what, and that is revealed more slowly within the manga. What I believe is happening here is that the anime is having a look at somewhat of the bigger picture of the manga, that when you take all of the different mysteries and disappearances that are in the manga and you begin to smush them all together, you actually get the story of how this city, and this is a bit of a spoiler right here, but that the city is a new contested hotbed for all of these different curses, curiosities, and monsters from ancient folklore to come in and take up residence. And this ties a little bit into Japanese thinking and Japanese superstition of how spirits, monsters, and curses and things like that can take shape based on people's belief, on the faith that they put into them, and how things seem to evolve over time. And Japan has all different kinds of fantastic stories and mysteries and monsters all across from north to south, east to west. It's packed in every single community. And so the idea that these creatures and curiosities being very much alive, well, they're contesting for space, they're contesting for dominance, they're contesting for power. And this city, as we learn later on, is somewhat newer, meaning that there is open space for all of these ancient and new curses and curiosities to flood into, and as such, they are rapidly evolving. That is the big story that is happening within the manga, and I think that the anime is trying to set that up a little bit more, but it comes at the detriment of actually playing out the horror and the mysteries that are core to the manga. Now, I did say also that I do like what we're getting right here, because as someone who has read the manga and now sees what they're doing, and especially seeing that hint about Ren and getting a little bit of Sumireko's story, which we don't get in the manga, that was cool. I really do enjoy that, and I like again how they are highlighting certain messages and details that are a little bit more buried in the manga. So this is in a sense doing what an adaptation is supposed to do, taking the strengths of one medium in order to tell the story that was given in the original medium, that being the manga. Now that does mean that certain things are dropped, some things are sped up, and some things are added, and that is up to everyone's own subjective opinion of what they like and what they don't like. For me, knowing more of the story, having read as much of the manga as I absolutely can, even keeping up with the newest chapters, yeah, I like it. But I can also admit, this is not the horror mystery series that originally hooked me, because that's not how it's being well adapted. And that actually leads me to a conversation that I've had with people in the comments about, well, mysteries in general, and how this really isn't that much of a mystery story, and based on especially the adaptation for the third episode, yeah, we can kind of put that to rest, that this really isn't that much of a mystery story anymore, so much as it is a supernatural one. However, if you read the manga, you do get more of that mysterious and horror element to the overall story. But let's actually quickly talk about what makes a mystery. Well, there actually are all different kinds of mysteries, and it depends upon the level. I mean, you've got something as simple as an Encyclopedia Brown mystery, where it's just simple logic and little known facts that allow you to piece everything together and get that reveal of, that's who stole the cake, or that's why the car is creepy. And then you have stuff such as like the CSI and all the crime crime shows out there, from Law and Order to whatever, where it comes down to, so this is the theft, this was the murder, this was the sexual assault. Now then, what are the clues that will lead us to the culprits? And it's all about the forensics and the interviews and piecing together all of the different pieces, and that's just very much observable stuff, much like with Encyclopedia Brown, however requiring more knowledge, more sophistication, more tools, more characters in order to bring everything together to solve the mystery. A step above that is where you then get into the realms of Sherlock Holmes, where despite people actually coming in with all of this knowledge and evidence and expertise and equipment, they might still get the solution wrong because they're missing that little bit of observation or logic that only a character such as Sherlock Holmes has because of their grand intellect. And this is something not exactly acute, more like a really cool aside, is that Edgar Allan Poe is actually credited with the first real detective story in fiction, with Murders in the Rue Morgue, where the characters are able to solve this ghastly murder by using information that the audience does not know, or using information that the audience can't really parse out for themselves based upon the context clues, much like within a Sherlock Holmes story. And so the enjoyment within those kinds of stories, as opposed to something like Encyclopedia Brown, where everyone should know this stuff, or a CSI show where it's about the forensics and you're along for the ride to get the information behind all of these observable facts, a Sherlock Holmes style story or a Murder in the Rue Morgue style of story is one where it presents to you the case, and you as the reader or as the audience, the viewer, are led to believe one thing until that one bit of information or two bits of crucial information as provided by the Sherlock Holmes style character reveals that actually you've misunderstood everything because you weren't using logic correctly, or you misunderstood one of the clues, and huzzah, it turns everything on its head and gives you the proper reveal. And then there are mysteries like 7.5 Deaths of Evil in Hardcastle, where there is no way that you as the reader, as someone within the audience, can actually know the proper ending unless you skip to the end and cheat, because the clues constantly mislead you. And that is the point, that you have no idea what's going on until the very end, when the last piece is given to you, and everything that seems like a red herring, everything that seems like a wrench in the gears, everything that just seems pointless, all now comes together. And if anyone ever tells me that they knew the ending to the 7.5 Deaths of Evil in Hardcastle right from the beginning of the story, I will call them a liar, because there is no way that anyone could have figured that out, and they will spend an eternity on Davy Jones's ship for their lies. Now, where does Mysterious Disappearances belong within that scale? Well, if you read the manga, it belongs in the fourth category. It doesn't matter what you as the reader know, you will never be able to figure this out on your own until the last bits of crucial evidence are thrown on in. As a result, this may come across to some people as not a very satisfying way of telling mysteries. There are people who do not enjoy that because they want to be able to solve the mystery for themselves and then receive that validation by the end of the book or by the end of the show. And with everything from Encyclopedia Brown to CSI, and even in many Sherlock Holmes stories, you can do that. But when it comes to the fourth level, where you really have no idea what's going on until the very end, that can be very unsatisfying and very frustrating for people, especially those who are more logically minded. The fourth requires a great suspension of disbelief and you buying into this crazy world and crazy mystery and just accepting that you are along for the ride, the same as with the characters. But coming back to it, that's really not the way that the anime rolls, because, well, the anime is already giving you so many of the answers right off the bat. Instead, it wishes to focus on specific messages. And for this episode, I was actually really surprised because even though I've read the manga several times, this never really stuck out to me quite as much until I watched this episode, I should say. And it was bullying. The matter of bullying. Bullying is a constant theme throughout most Japanese school-centered stories. And while Mysterious Disappearances is actually not based so much in high school, this is just one arc that happens to be, it falls in line with the usual tropes of a high school story from Japan. Bullying. A kid is being bullied, horrible things start happening, and bullying is a big issue. What do you do within such a stringent and vague society where bullying is going to happen, but if you call it on out, well, then it's going to make people really upset, like what we see with the teacher. Are you saying that I'm doing something wrong with my teaching? Nah. Or are you saying that the kids are lying or saying that the kids got it wrong? How dare you be so rude? You got to bring up evidence for that. Well, all of these kids say that that's not the case. Therefore, you're the liar. Therefore, you are the aggressor, and you broached the taboo. We do not talk about these things. You just act. You conform. Dang it. And speaking as a teacher, or as someone who taught for 4 years, bullying is a problem everywhere. And it's so dang frustrating to put up with it because the bullies will lie. The bullies will throw up their own guards. They will get their parents or their guardians to come in and protect them. The school systems are set up so that way no one is immediately punished because they need to get down to the bottom of this, which takes time, which allows for the bullies to constantly do what they're doing. And many times the bullied also then quickly become bullies themselves, lashing out against other students or against their own aggressors, and then you then have this just escalation of violence, of bitterness, of meanness between the students, and it just leads to problems so quickly. And as a teacher, yeah, you're going to go on the defensive where you're like, it's not my fault. Obviously, it's not my fault. I'm not the one bullying these kids. I'm trying to put a stop to it. Get off my back. And there really is no good, easy solution to bullying. And the reason for that is because, well, in order to stop the bullying, you actually need to stop the circumstances that are happening outside of the school that lead to the bullying. The bully's life is something that needs to be changed, whether that be their home circumstances or how they perceive themselves, as well as the circumstances of the bullied, which as teachers you don't have much, if any, control over. So how do you fix that kind of a problem? I'm just going to provide my personal assessment of how you can deal with bullying, and this is no easy fix, and maybe this isn't even a catch-all solution, but it does come down to respect. Kids need to be taught respect, and not just simply respect towards elders, which most of them only feign. No, respect meaning that I will not raise my voice against you without good, proper reason. I am not going to say mean things about you, even behind your back. Why? Well, because you do deserve my respect. Respect isn't earned. Respect is given. And if you, as an individual, want respect, so many bullies told me that they wanted to be respected. Well, you know what, bully? If you want to be respected, you have to give respect, because if you don't give respect, you will never get it back in kind, because no one's going to give you something that you're not giving to them in return. You want respect, bully? Give respect. Give respect to your classmates. Give respect to your teacher. But more than that, give respect to yourself. These kids who are beating up on Uname within this episode, they're little jerks. They're awful, and you can see how they will already hurt themselves in the long run, how they will be the architects of their own demise, of their own anguish, of their own agony, through their own stupidity, because they don't respect themselves. A person who respects themselves will not degrade themselves to the point where they are talking mean about other people because that's just fun to do. It makes you feel better. A person who respects themselves isn't going to waste their time, their talents, or their energy in beating up on someone else, because that's stupid. That does nothing for you. And you know it because, Well, when you respect yourself, you're doing what is honestly right by you, and bullying was never right. So in my opinion, the answer is respect. But how do you teach respect to a bunch of kids? Especially when you actually don't have all that much time with those kids. And again, a teacher doesn't have control of a child's life outside of their classroom. So Uname is essentially fighting a losing battle. She's using magic to take the quick and easy route, which, as we all know, leads to the dark side. And that's a total waste of just gorgeousness right there. So what is the answer? Well, in this episode, what we get here is that it's right to fight against bullying, but you can take it to the extremes. Uname took it to the extremes, but still, what is the solution to the problem with bullying? Well, we actually get it here in these 2 episodes, and we're going to get it in the upcoming episode as well, at least a hint to it, and that is friendships. When you are able to cultivate good, positive friendships between children, even if someone is getting bullied, they will have friends to fall back on. And friends can always be a very positive support and help and protection to the bullied kid. They can even stand up against the bully. They can bring evidence against that bully and then allow for proper authorities and parents and guardians to then deal with that bully. But also, let's say that the bully has good, positive friendships. Then there's a very good chance that they will be less likely to bully because their friends will apply positive peer pressure on them to do better, to give respect. The answer is good friendships. And that is something that you can see already in the 2nd episode. You can see a little bit of in this episode. And based on what I know from the manga and the preview at the end of the episode, we're going to see a budding friendship between Sumireko, Uname, and Oto, which is going to be very valuable going down into future chapters. And even though this video is actually going on way longer than I had intended for it to, but there's just actually so much to talk about right here. Woo! Let me just quickly address what we get at the very end of the episode with Ren reading Sumireko's story. Why I like this and why I'm going to hazard the spoilers is because this actually puts things into far greater perspective, which again, we're actually missing in the manga. Why is Ren drawn to Sumireko? Well, I always consider it was because, whoa, that's a mature beauty right there. And she has all the fine assets of a great author, but it's because the story that she wrote is a story that falls right in line with what Ren himself is going through. Later on down the line, we are very likely to see a fox-ish spirit, or at least someone wearing a fox mask. This is someone from Ren's past. And Ren himself, as he has said, well, he's not from this particular world or from this particular time. He belongs to the time right after the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, or maybe even earlier to the fire bombings of Japan. It's still a little bit unclear. There is a point far later on in the manga where we might be able to say more clearly that it is actually during the fire bombings of a place like Tokyo, but it's still a little bit unclear. But during that time, he becomes effectively a wandering spirit. He's lost, and he's trying to find out where he can be. And the story that Sumireko wrote resonates with him as a lost wanderer, as someone who just wants to finally have peace and find a place to call home and just put all of this behind him. And that desire is captured in this book. And then he actually gets to meet and work with the author of this book that resonated with him. As anyone who has ever read a book or watched a movie or a show that they absolutely love, that just became a part of them, when they get to meet the creator, of course they're going to gush. Of course they're going to be like, oh, can I just spend a day with you? I absolutely want to. Now he gets to work with this girl? Ren, you're not only a lucky lad, you are a lucky fan. So yeah, I know that's a little bit of a spoiler for the anime onlys, but just to kind of put everything into context, that's why this scene there is so important, and that's why I, as a reader of the manga, really, really enjoyed seeing this right here, because there is a point in the manga where Ren talks about the story that Sumireko wrote with Oto, but we actually don't get that deep into it, nor why it's so important to him. And also that this little moment right here only makes sense because of all the context clues that are sprinkled throughout the manga. So otherwise this would seem like a little bit of an interesting throwaway scene. Like we know that it's important because it's at the end of the credits, but oh boy, is it ever important to who Ren is, and especially to making sense of why he likes Sumireko so much. So there you have it, the review, the analysis, the breakdown, a little bit of insights into the world of teaching from Lars, heyo, all this great stuff, and hopefully you've learned a little bit about writing mysteries. And I will say this, writing mysteries is difficult. It's hard. I've been working on writing a murder mystery myself, which I am hoping, fingers crossed, to have released later on this year. And when that happens, I will certainly let you guys know, so that way you can check it out and tell me for yourselves if I have succeeded or if I have absolutely failed writing a good murder mystery. But until that time, and until the next video, all, thank you so much for joining us on this incredible adventure that we call writing, and tschüss.
今後床なめは禁止ですよ。